Imagine having a shortcut to truly understand a vast, complex history that often feels lost in traditional narratives. That's precisely what we're embarking on today. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a single, incredibly rich book, Lost Islamic History by Faris al-Khatib, and extract the most important nuggets of knowledge for you.
Yeah, our goal here is really to give you a full, structured understanding of its content, its flow.
Right, allowing you to grasp the core ideas, those surprising facts, without having to read the whole thing cover to cover.
Exactly. This deep dive isn't just a summary, it's more like a guided exploration. We want to give you those aha moments.
Yeah.
A thorough, yet still concise grasp of 1,400 years of Muslim civilization. We'll uncover the key points, the arguments, and those unique perspectives that really bring this history alive.
And we'll do it chronologically, chapter by chapter, following the book's structure.
That's the plan.
And the author's preface really sets the stage. He clarifies his aim right from the start.
He does. He wants to provide an accessible overview, doesn't he? From the 7th century origins right up to the modern day.
Specifically for the general reader, he noticed this big gap in American educational textbooks,
Which often sideline Muslim and non-Western civilizations, focusing almost entirely on a Eurocentric narrative.
Exactly. It's a huge deficiency he's trying to address.
Yeah.
And this second edition even adds a whole new chapter on Islamic thought, which sounds fascinating.
Yeah, and what I found really insightful from that preface was his personal motivation. He talks about his high school students, many from Muslim backgrounds, feeling completely disconnected from history class because it was all ancient Greece, Rome, then jumping to the European Renaissance and Enlightenment.
Right, like their own history didn't matter.
Precisely. So he wanted to offer an alternative, something that showcased the richness, the immense contributions of Muslim civilization. He wanted students to connect with figures like, say, Abu Hanifa, the great scholar, or Yusuf ibn Tashfin, the Berber leader.
Instead of just John Locke and Napoleon all the time.
Exactly. It's a really powerful call for more inclusive history, and it shows why this so-called lost history is actually so vital for everyone to understand.
That really frames it perfectly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive in. Part 1, the foundations and early expansion, starting with chapter 1, Pre-Islamic Arabia and the Prophet's life.
Right at the beginning.
We start in the Hijaz, that incredibly dry, mountainous, hot region in Western Arabia, temperature soaring, very little rain.
Yeah, and further east, just endless sand dunes, pretty much no permanent settlements, no greenery, just a really, really tough environment.
An unforgiving place. And yet, it's from this seemingly barren land that this new movement emerges in the early 600s.
A movement that, as you said, fundamentally changes the course of history, not just for Arabia, but for huge parts of the world.
What's really interesting is how that geography shaped everything. Despite being strategically located between continents.
Asia, Africa, Europe.
Right, the Arabian Peninsula was largely ignored by the big ancient empires. The Egyptians, Alexander, the Romans.
They just couldn't hack it, basically. The landscape was too harsh. Monsoon rains barely touched the south before hitting mountains. Mediterranean rains didn't reach far enough south.
And those wadis, the riverbeds, only flowed sometimes.
Exactly. Gushing rivers one minute, dry land the next. Only really small, resilient communities could survive near the scattered oases.
So in that kind of environment, community cooperation becomes absolutely essential. It's not just nice, it's survival.
Definitely. People relied heavily on their relatives, sharing resources, shelter. It was the only way to defend against famine, the heat.
And this idea of a pure family line became really central to their social structure.
Which leads to that fascinating cultural value you mentioned, hospitality.
Yeah, it was so important that a guest was guaranteed 3 days of total security, no questions asked, just protection.
That really speaks volumes about those deep-seated communal values born out of necessity.
Okay, so that's the backdrop. This intense need for community. How does Islam emerge from that?
Well, that collective necessity is crucial for understanding why the emergence of Islam was so disruptive. The very first Muslims, they had to hide their beliefs initially.
Why was that?
Because the core message, social, economic, tribal equality, directly threatened the existing power structure, specifically the wealthy and powerful Quraysh tribe in Mecca.
They were the elite.
Absolutely. Mecca wasn't just a religious center because of the Kaaba and all its idols. It was a massive economic hub. The annual pilgrimages brought huge amounts of trade. The Quraysh got rich from it.
And Muhammad's message of strict monotheism.
Right.
One God.
Meant no idols, no pilgrimage, no business, essentially. It was a direct economic threat to their entire system.
Okay, so it makes sense then that the early converts weren't the powerful people.
Not at all. It was largely slaves, servants, the poor, people who were naturally drawn to this new religion where your wealth or social status didn't define your worth. It was radically egalitarian.
But eventually, they became too visible to ignore.
Yeah, their player groups got bigger. At first, the Quraysh just ridiculed them, but then they started to realize the gravity of these new ideas, as the book puts it.
Monotheism, social justice, equality, submission to God's rule.
All deeply threatening to their entrenched power and way of life.
So what did the Quraysh do?
Well, their first instinct was to eliminate Muhammad. But he had protection. His uncle, Abu Talib, was the leader of his clan, the Banu Hashim.
And tribal customs were strong.
Very strong. Killing Muhammad directly would have almost certainly sparked a civil war, which they wanted to avoid.
So they couldn't touch him directly?
But they could go after his followers, especially those without strong tribal protection. They were harassed, denied rights, persecuted.
Trying to deter others from joining.
Exactly. A systematic campaign to suppress the movement.
Did they try to stop it spreading beyond Mecca, too?
They did, but they failed there as well. A group of Muslims escaped persecution by fleeing across the Red Sea to Abyssinia. The Christian king there, the Negus, promised them protection. Quraysh emissaries went to Abyssinia, tried to convince the Negus to send the refugees back. But after hearing Muhammad's cousin Jafar recite Quranic verses about Jesus and Mary, the Negus refused. He recognized them as fellow monotheists.
Wow, that's a significant moment.
Huge. And it meant Islam kept spreading. Visitors came to Mecca for pilgrimage or trade, heard the message, converted, and took it back to their own tribes and towns. It became harder and harder for the Quraysh to contain it.
Which led them to more extreme measures.
Yes, the boycott. In 617 CE, they imposed a total boycott on Muhammad's entire clan, the Banu Hashim. No trade, no intermarriage. They were forced into exile in a barren valley outside Mecca.
That must have been devastating.
It was a humanitarian crisis. Hunger, isolation, economic hardship, even for the non-Muslims in the clan who stood by their kin. But crucially, the boycott didn't stop Muhammad's preaching.
And it showed the strength of the Muslim community.
It really did. It powerfully demonstrated that core Islamic idea the book highlights. Loyalty to the religion transcended loyalty to a tribe or family. Their faith held them together.
But the boycott still took a heavy toll personally, right?
Absolutely. The hardship likely contributed to the death of Khadija, Muhammad's wife, and the very first convert in 619. Her support had been crucial for him.
The huge loss.
And then soon after, his uncle and protector, Abu Talib, also died. Suddenly, Muhammad was incredibly vulnerable in Mecca. The attacks from the Quraysh became much bolder.
So he had to look elsewhere for safety.
Yes. He sought refuge in Taif, a nearby town, but they rejected him outright, pelted him with stones as he left, bloodied and dejected, a really low point.
That's harsh.
It is, but there's a poignant tradition associated with it. The angel Jibril supposedly offered to destroy Taif for their treatment of him.
And Muhammad refused.
He did. He expressed hope that future believers would come from their descendants. It's a powerful moment of forgiveness and hope, and the book notes it played a really significant role later, especially for Indian Muslims connecting spiritually to the Prophet.
Okay, so Taif was a dead end. Mecca was increasingly hostile. What was next?
Muhammad realized a totally new approach was needed for Islam to even survive. The opportunity arose in Yathrib, an oasis town about 300 kilometers north, later known as Medina.
What was the opportunity there?
Yathrib had two main tribes, the Aus and Khazraj, who were locked in this seemingly endless destructive cycle of conflict. They actually invited Muhammad to come and mediate their disputes.
As an outside arbitrator.
Exactly. And this led to a truly foundational document, the Constitution of Medina.
Tell us about that. It sounds important.
Oh, it was revolutionary for its time. It essentially created a political entity. It granted the Jewish tribes freedom of religion.
Which was significant.
Hugely. But it also required them to recognize Muhammad's political authority and participate in the common defense of the city. The book makes a key point here. Muhammad's nascent political entity in Medina would serve as the model Islamic state for centuries of Muslim governments, particularly with regards to the treatment of non-Muslim minorities.
So it established a framework for a kind of pluralistic state right from the beginning.
That's a good way to put it. It set a powerful precedent.
And did the nature of the Quranic revelations change during this Medina period?
Yes, noticeably. The Maidanese verses tend to be longer, more detailed. They deal with the practicalities of building a community and state rules for worship, taxation, inheritance, how Muslims should relate to each other, and how they should relate to non-Muslims.
So more legislation focused.
You could say that. The Quran provided the broad principles, and then the Hadith, the Prophet's own words and actions, provided the specific details. The Hadith became the second most important source of guidance after the Quran itself.
And there was an emphasis on connecting with earlier prophets.
Definitely. Stories of Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, Jesus, they were all emphasized to show the continuity of the core message. This was particularly aimed at the Jewish community in Medina.
How did the Jewish community react?
It was mixed. They shared monotheism, revered the same prophets, even initially prayed towards Jerusalem, just like the Muslims did at first. Some did convert, seeing Muhammad perhaps as a messianic figure.
But not all.
No, many rejected his claims. And this tension, this evolving relationship, would lead to conflict down the line, especially as the community faced military challenges.
Right, which brings us to the early battles. There was a shift regarding warfare.
A major one. A specific Quranic revelation came down, verses 22.3940, which explicitly made war permissible. Not just permissible, but even obligatory when Muslims were being oppressed.
So self-defense became a religious duty.
Yes, and it signaled that Islam wasn't just a set of beliefs, it was a complete way of life, encompassing everything, including political and military action. And the community in Medina, having faced years of persecution in Mecca, was ready to defend itself.
The first big test was the Battle of Badr in 624.
Correct. A small Muslim force, only about 300 men, intercepted a Quraysh caravan. They ended up facing a much larger Qurayshi army sent from Mecca.
And the Muslims won against the odds.
Decisively. This victory was monumental. It wasn't just a military win. It established the Muslims as a serious political and military force, as the book says. It boosted their morale immensely and significantly dented the prestige of the Quraysh among other Arab tribes. They saw it as clear proof of God's favor.
But the Quraysh weren't going to let that stand.
No way. They came back seeking revenge the next year, 625, at the Battle of Uhud. They brought a larger army, aiming to harass Medina and damage Muhammad's standing.
And this battle didn't go as well for the Muslims.
It was nearly disastrous. Hamza, the hero of Badr, was killed. Muhammad himself was injured. The Quraysh eventually retreated, thinking they'd done enough damage. Uhud didn't destroy the Muslim community, but it was a serious setback.
And it caused internal problems.
Yes, it created tension with Medina's Jewish tribes. Most of them hadn't joined the fight, refusing to honor the terms of the Constitution of Medina regarding common defense. That sowed seeds of distrust.
Which came to a head later.
Exactly. At the Battle of the Trench in 627 CE, the Quraysh came back again, this time besieging Medina. And they had help from one of the Jewish tribes within Medina, the Banu Qurayza, who were positioned on the city's vulnerable southern side.
How did the Muslims defend against that?
Muhammad took the advice of Salman, a Persian immigrant. They dug a deep trench around the exposed parts of Medina, a completely novel tactic in Arabian warfare. It completely baffled the Quraysh cavalry.
So the siege failed.
It did. The Quraysh eventually gave up and went home. But the issue of the Banu Qurayza remained.
Because they had broken the treaty.
Yes, they'd broken the constitution of Medina by siding with the enemy during a siege. They were judged according to their own laws, and the ruling was harsh. The men were executed, the women and children exiled. This set a very clear precedent about how threats to the state's security, especially treason, would be handled, even involving non-Muslims who had previously been granted protection. Tolerance had its limits when the existence of the state was threatened.
Okay, so after the trench, Medina is secure, the Quraysh are weakened. Muhammad's position is much stronger.
Much stronger. He's now in a position to deal with Mecca as an equal, perhaps even from a position of strength. In 628, inspired by a revelation promising victory, he set out towards Mecca with about 1,500 followers.
Enough for war.
No. Crucially, they came dressed as pilgrims, unarmed except for travel swords. The goal was peaceful pilgrimage, to assert the Muslims' right to access the Kaaba.
How did the Meccans react to that?
They were baffled, caught completely off guard, and internally divided. Allowing Muhammad in peacefully would look weak, but their whole identity and economy were based on facilitating pilgrimage. They couldn't just turn pilgrims away.
So they negotiated.
Yes. The result was the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. It stipulated a 10-year truce, and the Muslims would be allowed to perform the pilgrimage the following year.
Some Muslims weren't happy with that.
Initially, no. It seemed like a concession. But the book argues it was a strategic masterstroke by Muhammad. That truce provided a welcomed respite from conflict that gave Muhammad the ability to expand Islam far beyond Medina peacefully.
And Islam really spread during that truce.
Exponentially. Missionaries were sent out across Arabia, even to the borders of the Byzantine and Persian empires. Whole Bedouin tribes converted and allied themselves with Muhammad. Even former enemies, prominent Meccan commanders like Khalid ibn al-Walid and Amr ibn al-As, saw the writing on the wall and came to Medina to convert. The treaty actually fueled Islam's growth dramatically.
But the truce didn't last the full 10 years.
No. Just 2 years later, in 630, a tribe allied with the Quraysh attacked a tribe allied with Muhammad, a clear breach of the treaty.
Which gave Muhammad justification to act.
Exactly, and by now, his position was unassailable. He marched on Mecca with a force of 10,000 united Arabs.
And Mecca fell easily.
Pretty much. Most Meccans realized resistance was futile. There were only minor skirmishes. Muhammad entered the city almost bloodlessly. It was a triumphant return, seen as the final victory of Islam over the old ways.
What did he do upon entering?
The hundreds of idols around the Kaaba were destroyed, and the shrine was rededicated to the worship of the one God, Allah. But perhaps most remarkably, Muhammad was incredibly lenient in victory.
How so?
Most Meccans were left unharmed. This was almost unheard of in the brutal tribal warfare of the time. As the book says, once again, Muhammad was setting the example that his prophethood marked the beginning of a new era with new rules and customs. The period of Jahiliyyah, or ignorance, was over.
This must have seemed like a miracle to his followers.
Absolutely. This rapid success, this ability to unite warring tribes under one banner, it convinced Muslims that God was guiding and protecting Islam, that they had a special mission to spread this true religion. That conviction really shaped their worldview for centuries to come.
By this point, Muhammad is around 60 years old. How was Islam formalized as a system?
Through his ongoing teachings and the continuing Quranic revelations, the core tenets were solidified: belief, worship, governance. A completely new social order was established, one based on Islamic unity under God's law, transcending old tribal and national loyalties.
He emphasized that in his final sermon.
Very powerfully, he declared, "You all descended from Adam, and Adam was created from dirt. The most noble in the sight of God is the most pious. No Arab is superior to a non-Arab except by their God consciousness." It was a radical message of equality under God.
And politically, Arabia was united.
For the first time ever, yes. A single Muslim empire covering the entire peninsula. He even made inroads among tribes bordering the Byzantine and Persian empires. After conquering Mecca, he returned to Medina and began preparing the community for a future without him, emphasizing their obligations and the need to preserve the Quran and his example, the Sunnah.
Which led to his farewell pilgrimage in 632.
Yes, the Hajj. He spoke to thousands, reminding them again of equality, warning against oppression, urging respect for women, telling them to leave behind the old tribal feuds. His farewell sermon really encapsulated his entire prophethood. It was a complete revolution. A new order was dawning, destined to spread far beyond Arabia.
According to Islamic belief, his mission was complete then.
It was. He was God's messenger, delivering the Quran and providing the perfect example. The Quran itself was finalized. It had been recorded on various materials, but crucially, it was memorized completely by many of his companions, a feat aided by the strong Arab oral tradition.
And the Hadith, his sayings and actions.
Also preserved orally and in writing, becoming the second key source of Islamic guidance. A verse revealed shortly before his death stated, "Today I have perfected for you your religion and completed my favor upon you, and have approved for you Islam as your religion." That verse, Quran 5.3, signaled the completion and preservation of the divine message.
Soon after, he fell ill.
In the early summer of 632, yes. He became too weak to lead prayers and appointed his close friend Abu Bakr to lead in his place. His final days were incredibly emotional for his followers.
But his death also reinforced a core belief.
Absolutely. That uncompromising monotheism, only God is divine. All creatures, even prophets, experience death. This understanding was crucial as the community faced the inevitable question of who would lead them next.
Which brings us smoothly into Chapter 3, the Rightly Guided Caliphs, establishing the empire, a absolutely pivotal period.
Definitely. The community faced its first major leadership crisis. The first to step up was Abu Bakr, ruling from 632 to 634.
And he took the title Khalifa.
Yes, Khalifa al-Rasul, successor of the Messenger of God, shortened to Khalifa or Caliph. His role wasn't prophetic. Muhammad was the final prophet, and the caliph was the political leader tasked with preserving the religion and inspiring the community. He set the precedent for all later caliphs.
What were his first moves?
Critically, he signaled continuity. He immediately dispatched an expeditionary force north towards Byzantine Syria, showing the Muslim Ummah, the community, would pursue its goals despite the prophet's death.
But there was a more immediate internal threat.
Yes, a serious one. What became known as the Ridda Wars, or Wars of Apostasy.
What was that about?
Various tribes across Arabia started to break away. Some claimed new prophets had arisen after Muhammad. Others simply refused to pay the zakat, the obligatory charity.
Which was seen as a threat to Islam itself.
A fundamental threat. If people could just pick and choose parts of the religion or declare new prophets, the whole thing would unravel. Abu Bakr acted decisively. He appointed Khalid ibn al-Walid.
The sword of God.
The very same. Undefeated general, master of desert warfare, Khalid swiftly crushed the rebellions. By 633, the entire Arabian Peninsula was firmly reunited under Abu Bakr's leadership in Medina.
What was the lasting significance of these Ridda Wars?
The book highlights three key things. First, spiritual unity was paramount, no deviations. Muhammad was the final prophet. Second, political unity was essential. One Muslim state, one caliph, especially crucial, being sandwiched between the Byzantines and Sassanids.
And third,
central government authority was confirmed, a huge break from the decentralized tribal past. The caliph in Medina had real authority over the entire peninsula.
Abu Bakr also played a role in preserving the Quran.
A vital one. During the prophet's life, it was written on scattered fragments, but primarily memorized. The Ridda Wars saw many of these memorizers killed in battle.
Which was a potential crisis.
It was. So Abu Bakr ordered the compilation of all those scattered written fragments into one single authoritative text, a crucial step for preserving the holy book.
Okay, so after Abu Bakr's short but impactful reign, Umar takes over.
Yes, Umar, caliph from 634 to 644, an early convert very close to the prophet. His succession was smooth, bringing much-needed stability.
And he focused on expansion.
He did. With Arabia unified, he looked north. But it wasn't just about conquest for conquest's sake. The old ways of tribal raiding were now against Islamic law. Muslims were one ummah. You couldn't raid fellow Muslims.
So they needed an external focus?
Partly, yes. And also to provide security for Muslim tribes now living right on the borders of the Byzantine and Sassanid empires.
And the timing was good.
Incredibly opportune. The Byzantines and Sassanids had just finished this devastating, decades-long war between themselves from 603 to 628. Both were severely weakened, exhausted. The lands of Syria and Mesopotamia were ripe for the taking.
But this wasn't just typical warfare.
No, Umar rigorously followed the Islamic ethics of war laid down by Abu Bakr. Protect civilians, women, children, elderly, monks, don't destroy crops. This was revolutionary compared to the usual imperial practices of the time. It showed Islam offered a different, more humane order.
So armies went into Syria and Mesopotamia simultaneously.
In 633, yes. Khalid ibn al-Walid led the charge in Persia, Yazid, son of Abu Sufyan, into Syria. The Byzantines mobilized, but the combined Muslim forces routed them at the Battle of Ajnadayn in Palestine.
Which opened up Syria.
It did. Khalid besieged Damascus, which fell in 635. The treaty he made was clever, guaranteeing local lives, property, religion in exchange for tribute, but targeting the Byzantine government, not the people, reducing the chance of rebellion.
But the Byzantines tried again.
Emperor Heraclius gathered a larger force, leading to the absolutely decisive Battle of Yarmouk in 636. Despite being outnumbered, the Muslims won a crushing victory. Byzantine disunity, Arab familiarity with the terrain, Heraclius essentially gave up Syria.
And Egypt fell soon after.
By 642, yes. It's astonishing when you think about it. Two of the Byzantine Empire's richest, most valuable provinces lost to these people from the desert who they'd barely even acknowledged before.
How did the locals react?
For most people, daily life didn't change much. Churches stayed open, farmers farmed, trade continued. For the Muslims, it was proof God was on their side. For the Byzantines, the beginning of the end.
And Umar went to Syria himself to oversee things.
He did. He personally traveled there to set up the administration. One surprising move was relieving Khalid ibn al-Walid of command.
Why? He was their best general.
It seems shocking, but the reasoning, according to Muslim historians, was that Umar wanted to remind the armies that victory came from God, not just one brilliant general. It reinforced the idea of divine guidance.
Who did he appoint as governor?
Muawiyah, from the powerful Umayyad clan. a skilled administrator who would eventually make Syria the powerhouse of the Muslim world.
And Umar also went to Jerusalem.
Yes, he personally attended its surrender in 637. The treaty was similar to others. But what's unique, and a really powerful precedent, is that the Muslims allowed Jews to return and worship in the city for the first time in over 500 years.
That flows directly from the Constitution of Medina.
Exactly, a practical application of that principle of religious freedom for the people of the book. Umar also cleaned up the Temple Mount area, which had been neglected, and built the first Al-Aqsa Mosque there, Islam's third holiest site.
While this was happening in Syria, what about Persia?
Attention turned back to the Sassanid Empire. Umar appointed Said ibn Abi Waqqas to lead the armies into Mesopotamia. After some tough fighting, especially against the Sassanids' war elephants, Saad won a decisive victory at the Battle of Qadisiyah in late 636.
Was that the end for the Sassanids?
Pretty much. Their capital, Ctesiphon, fell in 637 after a siege. The whole fertile Tigris-Euphrates plain was secured for the Muslims. The Sassanid Empire was effectively finished.
So in just 10 years, Umar completely transformed the Muslim state.
Absolutely. From a group of desert tribes to a major regional power. His administrative skill alongside the military victories was incredible. He's rightly seen as one of the most successful rulers in Islamic history.
How did his reign end?
Suddenly and violently. He was murdered in 644 while leading prayers in Medina by a disgruntled Persian slave. But even on his deathbed, he ensured stability by appointing a council of 6 senior companions to choose the next caliph.
And they chose Uthman.
Correct. Uthman ruled from 644 to 656. He was also an early convert, but significantly, from the wealthy and powerful Umayyad clan. He promised to follow Umar's policies.
Did the expansion continue?
It did. Conquest pushed deeper into Persia, securing the Iranian plateau by 650 and Khorasan by 651. The last Sassanid king was killed around then. That ancient empire was completely gone.
Uthman also focused on naval power.
Yes, a major innovation. He ordered the first Muslim naval fleet built to counter Byzantine sea power in the Mediterranean. The governors in Syria and Egypt relied heavily on local Christian expertise, Copts, other denominations.
Why were they willing to help?
Many of these Christian groups had been marginalized or even persecuted by the Byzantine Orthodox Church. They often received better, more tolerant treatment under Muslim rule, so they were quite enthusiastic partners in building the fleet.
And the Navy was successful.
Very. They captured strategic islands like Cyprus and Crete and even raided Sicily. Uthman also established diplomatic ties as far away as Tang Dynasty China in 650. The reach of the early Muslim world was already vast.
But things weren't smooth internally for Uthman.
No, discontent started to grow. There were accusations of nepotism, that he favored his own Umayyad relatives for top positions.
Like Muawiyah in Syria.
Exactly. And as the pace of conquest slowed down, less booty flowed back to Medina, leading to economic stagnation and grumbling. He just didn't command the same level of universal respect as Abu Bakr or Umar.
And this led to his assassination.
Tragically, yes. In 656, some disgruntled soldiers came from Egypt to Medina to protest his policies. On their way back, they supposedly intercepted a letter ordering their execution, though its authenticity is debated. They turned back, furious, and besieged Uthman in his house.
Did anyone defend him?
People in Medina offered, and Muawiyah offered to send troops from Syria, but Uthman refused, all held. He didn't want Muslim bloodshed defending him. He was murdered while reading the Quran. And as the book says so starkly, with him so was the unity of the Muslim world.
A devastating turning point.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Ali, the 4th rightly guided caliph from 656 to 661, and the first civil war, the Fitna.
A truly tragic period. Ali's most immediate challenge was dealing with Uthman's murderers. Popular opinion demanded justice. Muawiyah, Uthman's cousin and the powerful governor of Syria, was particularly insistent.
But Ali didn't punish them immediately.
He made a pragmatic but ultimately controversial decision. He knew the rebels had significant support, and trying to punish them immediately could lead to his own assassination and even wider conflict. He felt he needed to consolidate his own authority first. He also moved the capital from Medina to Kufa in Iraq, a more central location for the empire and a region with strong loyalty to him.
How was that decision received?
Not well by everyone. Many in Medina felt he wasn't acting decisively enough to avenge Uthman. Soon, a significant opposition force gathered, led by 2 highly respected companions, Talha and Zubair, and even joined by the Prophet's widow, Aisha. They marched to Iraq to confront Ali.
So former allies were now opposing each other.
Yes. And the book notes that both sides sincerely believed they were right based on their own ijtihad, their independent reasoning on Islamic law. It wasn't simply a power grab, it was a genuine disagreement on the right course of action.
This led to the Battle of the Camel?
Near Basra in 656, yes. There were attempts to negotiate peace, but extremists on both sides apparently pushed for conflict. It was a terrible battle, indecisive, with heavy losses on both sides. Talha and Zubair were killed. Aisha, deeply regretting her involvement, retired completely from politics.
But that didn't end the conflict. Muawiyah was still out there.
Exactly. Muawiyah, commanding the powerful Syrian army, had remained neutral in the Battle of the Camel. But he still refused to pledge allegiance to Ali until Uthman's killers were brought to justice.
So Ali and Muawiyah were on a collision course.
It seemed that way. To avoid more devastating warfare between the main Muslim armies, Ali agreed to arbitration in 658 CE to settle the dispute.
But the arbitration didn't solve things either.
No, it actually created a new problem. A group of Ali's own hardcore supporters rejected the very idea of arbitration. They broke away, declaring decision belongs to God alone. They became known as the Kharijites, meaning those who seceded.
What was their issue?
They took an extremely literal and harsh view. They believed that by agreeing to human arbitration, Ali had committed a major sin, effectively making him an unbeliever, an apostate. They developed this radical theology that major sins automatically excluded someone from Islam.
That's a very extreme position.
Very. They became this extremist, religious, and political faction, terrorizing parts of Iraq, fighting against anyone who didn't agree with their rigid interpretation.
Did Ali deal with them?
He decisively defeated their main force in battle. But the Kharijite ideology persisted underground. They continued their campaign of terror, plotting to assassinate both Ali and Muawiyah, hoping to rid the world of leaders they considered illegitimate.
And they succeeded in killing Ali.
Tragically, yes. A Kharijite assassin struck Ali down while he was praying in the mosque in Kufa in 661 CE. His turbulent caliphate came to a violent end.
So, with Ali gone, who's left?
Muawiyah. As the book puts it, he was really the only man left in the Muslim world with widespread support and the capabilities to be an effective leader. The caliphate effectively passed to him, ending the era of the rightly guided caliphs and ushering in the Umayyad dynasty.
Okay, that's a huge turning point. This takes us into part 2, Dynasties, Golden Ages, and Upheaval, starting with chapter 4 on the Umayyads and Abbasids. Muawiyah's rule, from 661 to 680, marks a real shift.
A fundamental change in Muslim government. He inherited a fractured world still reeling from years of civil war. His great achievement was unification.
How did he manage that?
He leveraged his incredibly strong support base in Syria. And he was a master politician, a pragmatist. He negotiated a deal with Ali's elder son, Hassan, convincing him to give up any claim to the caliphate, thus avoiding more bloodshed and bringing stability.
And he changed the style of the caliphate.
Significantly, he was the first caliph to sit on a throne, to have more court ceremony, to pray in an enclosed area for security. He moved away from the simple, austere style of the first 4 caliphs towards something more like royalty. It was a blend, the book suggests, of old Arab tribal leadership styles, negotiation, gift-giving, honor, combined with the imperial traditions of the Romans and Sassanids they had conquered.
And he kept the empire focused outwards.
Yes, a classic strategy to reduce internal divisions. He continued the war against the Byzantines, his navy took Rhodes and Crete. They even managed the first major, though unsuccessful, siege of Constantinople itself between 674 and 678.
Expansion in North Africa also continued.
It did. Uqba ibn Nafi pushed deeper into Byzantine Africa around 670, founding the key garrison city of Kairouan in Tunisia. His Arab forces were significantly boosted by local Berber converts to Islam. By 680, Umayyad armies were pushing right across the Maghreb, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, towards the Atlantic.
But Muawiyah made a decision about succession that proved controversial.
Highly controversial. He appointed his own son, Yazid, as his successor. This explicitly turned the caliphate into a hereditary monarchy, breaking with the previous elective or selection-based system.
Why did he do that?
His reasoning, according to the book, was primarily about stability. He'd seen the chaos and bloodshed caused by the succession disputes after Umar, Uthman, and Ali. He believed a hereditary system, while maybe not ideal in theory, was the only practical way to prevent future civil wars and maintain unity.
But Yazid wasn't universally accepted.
Far from it. He lacked the prestige of being a companion of the Prophet. There were rumors about his lifestyle, that he wasn't pious enough, This, combined with lingering loyalty to Ali's family in some quarters, led to immediate revolts when Yazid took power.
Including the one led by Hussein.
Yes, Ali's younger son Hussein. He was persuaded, perhaps unwisely, to seek support in Kufa, Iraq, which was known for its pro-Alid sentiments. But the Kufans, who had pledged support, ultimately abandoned him under pressure from Yazid's governor.
Leading to the tragedy at Karbala.
In 680 CE, Hussein and his small band of family and followers, only about 70 people, were surrounded by Yazid's much larger army at Karbala. They were massacred. This event, the martyrdom of Hussein, became absolutely central to Shia identity, cementing the split with the Sunni majority. As the book says, it's one of the founding legends of the Shia.
And there was another major revolt.
Yes, led by Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr. He was the son of one of the companions killed at the Battle of the Camel. After Hussein's death, anti-Umayyad sentiment exploded across the empire. Ibn al-Zubayr capitalized on this, declaring himself caliph in Mecca.
And he gained a lot of support.
Widespread support, Iraq, Egypt, even parts of Syria. When Yazid died suddenly in 683, Umayyad control just collapsed almost everywhere. It looked like their dynasty was finished.
But they came back.
Remarkably, yes. Through sheer tenacity, clever tribal politics, and military force, led by Marwan, another cousin of Muawiyah, and especially his son Abd al-Malik, they methodically regained Syria, then Egypt, then Iraq. Finally, in 692, they besieged Mecca and defeated and killed Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr. The Umayyads had, as the book says, come back from the brink of extinction.
And after consolidating power, the conquest resumed.
They did. Musa ibn Usair completed the conquest of North Africa, and then, almost simultaneously, in 711 CE, you have two major expansions.
Spain and India.
Exactly. Tariq ibn Ziyad, Musa's lieutenant, crosses the Straits of Gibraltar into the Iberian Peninsula, Spain. The Visigothic kingdom there collapsed surprisingly quickly after the Battle of Guadalete.
Why so fast?
The Visigothic king, Roderick, was deeply unpopular. Many of his nobles and soldiers deserted him. Few cities put up strong resistance. The Muslims offered relatively good terms, and local populations often preferred them to the Visigoths.
Settlement followed.
Yes, Berbers settled mainly in the north and west, Arabs in the fertile south, and the cities. Intermarriage was common, creating this unique hybrid Hispano-Muslim society, Al-Andalus.
And at the same time in India?
711 again. A Muslim trading ship was attacked by pirates off the coast of Sindh in modern Pakistan. The local ruler, Raja Dahir, refused to help. So the Umayyad governor sent an army led by a remarkably young commander, Muhammad bin Qasim, still in his teens.
Wow.
He led 6,000 Syrian soldiers into Sindh. He was apparently aided by local Buddhist officials and others unhappy with Raja Dahir. Sindh was brought under Muslim rule. For the first time, a part of India was under Muslim control.
And how was Muslim rule there?
Significantly, they extended religious freedom to the Buddhists and Hindus, treating them as protected people of the book. This led to, as the book notes, little discontent with Muslim rule and relative social harmony.
Okay, so by the mid-700s, the Umayyad Empire is vast, from Spain to India. But there were underlying problems brewing, particularly with social policies.
Yes, and this would eventually lead to their downfall. The rapid expansion brought huge numbers of non-Muslims under their rule. In the early to mid-700s, maybe only 10% of the empire's population was actually Muslim.
How did the tax system work?
Non-Muslims paid a poll tax, the jizya, and were exempt from military service. Muslims paid a land tax and the zakat, the obligatory charity. The jizya was often lower than the taxes people had paid under the Byzantines or Sassanids, so it wasn't necessarily unpopular initially.
But what happened when people converted to Islam?
That was the problem. If everyone converted, the state's tax revenue from jizya would plummet. So the Umayyad government implemented a policy. Converts to Islam, if they were non-Arabs, still had to pay the jizya.
Wait, so only non-Arab converts paid it?
Exactly. In theory, it was to protect revenue and ensure conversions were sincere, but in practice, it created institutionalized discrimination based on race, as the book puts it. Most converts were non-Arabs, Copts in Egypt, Greeks, Berbers in North Africa, Persians. They converted to Islam but were still taxed like non-Muslims, while Arab Muslims were exempt.
That sounds deeply unfair and contradictory to Islam's message of equality.
It absolutely was. It directly contradicted the Prophet's famous statement, "No Arab is better than a non-Arab, and no non-Arab is better than an Arab." This policy created huge resentment among the growing non-Arab Muslim population, the Mawali.
Was there any attempt to change this?
There was one brief, shining moment. Caliph Umar ibn Abd al-Aziz, who reigned from 717 to 720. He was deeply pious and tried to undo this discriminatory tax policy. His reforms were incredibly popular with non-Arabs, and later Muslims revered him, calling him the fifth rightly guided caliph.
But it didn't last?
Tragically, no. His own Umayyad family distrusted his reforms. They saw him as undermining their power base. He was poisoned just 2 years into his reign. His reforms were just a blip. The discriminatory policy continued, and the discontent among non-Arab Muslims just kept growing.
Setting the stage for revolution.
Precisely. The Abbasid revolution in the mid-700s.
Who are the Abbasids?
They descended from the Prophet's uncle, Abbas. So they had a closer blood relation to the Prophet than the Umayyads did. They skillfully used this, circulating a rumor that the right to rule had been secretly transferred to them from Ali's descendants, giving them legitimacy in the eyes of many, including those who felt Ali's family had been wronged.
And they tapped into the non-Arab discontent.
Absolutely. From their base, first in Syria, then Iraq, they sent secret agents east to Khorasan in Persia. The Persian population there deeply resented Umayyad rule, which they saw as Arab-dominated and oppressive.
So they built support underground.
For decades, through the 730s and 740s, swearing secret oaths of allegiance, building networks, all far from the Umayyad capital in Damascus. They promised a more equal society, hinted that Ali's descendants would have a greater role. They attracted a broad coalition.
Who joined them?
Pious Muslims unhappy with the Umayyad worldliness, non-Arab Muslims furious about the jizya policy, and Shia sympathizers who wanted Ali's family in power.
When did the revolt break out openly?
In 747 CE, they dramatically unfurled their distinctive black banners in the city of Merv in modern Turkmenistan. The revolution was led by a brilliant but mysterious figure called Abu Muslim, probably Persian.
And they were successful quickly.
Remarkably so. Under Abu Muslim's leadership, they secured Khorasan as a base, then pushed west into Persia, where local Muslims rose up against the Umayyads. Kufa in Iraq, always anti-Umayyad, also revolted.
The Umayyads couldn't stop them.
By the time the Umayyad Caliph Marwan II mobilized his main army, the Abbasids already controlled most of Iraq. The final showdown was the Battle of the Zab in early 750. The Abbasid forces crushed the Umayyad army.
And that was it for the Umayyads.
Pretty much. Organized resistance collapsed. Cities fell one by one, and the Abbasids were ruthless. They systematically hunted down and executed almost the entire Umayyad family to prevent any future challenge to their rule.
Almost the entire family.
Just one prominent member escaped the young prince Abd al-Rahman. His legendary flight across North Africa eventually led him to Al-Andalus, Spain. There, far from Abbasid reach, he established an independent Umayyad emirate that survived for nearly 300 more years. An incredible story of survival.
So the Abbasid Caliphate begins. Did it live up to the promises of the revolution?
Not entirely. The revolution promised a return to prophetic ideals, equality for non-Arabs, a role for Ali's descendants. But in reality, the caliphate remained hereditary, often just as authoritarian as the Umayyads had been. This disappointed many, especially the supporters of Ali's family.
But they did establish a new center of power.
Yes, the second Abbasid Caliph, Al-Mansur, built a magnificent new capital, Baghdad, founded in 765 near the old Persian capital. Within just 20 years, it was the largest city in the world, over 1 million people. A true global center for government, culture, science, art. Think of Harun al-Rashid, the Caliph of Arabian Nights fame, sending gifts like an elephant and a water clock to Charlemagne in Europe. That's the scale of wealth and influence.
And the nature of the empire changed under the Abbasids.
Fundamentally, the era of major military conquest largely ended. There were still raids against the Byzantines, but no huge territorial gains. Al-Andalus remained independent. Expansion in Central Asia was slow. Turks started entering the Islamic world more through migration and conversion than conquest. As the book puts it, the era of Muslim military conquest was over for the time being. Instead, the era of Muslim intellectual conquest was about to begin.
A perfect transition to Chapter 5, Intellectual Golden Ages, a scientific revolution.
Yes. This period, roughly the 9th to the 13th centuries, is just staggering. An explosion of scientific, religious, philosophical, and cultural development, unlike almost anything else in world history.
What drove this?
Islamic civilization now stretched from Spain to India, bringing together diverse cultures and, crucially, their accumulated knowledge from ancient civilizations, Greek, Persian, Indian. They didn't just preserve it, they synthesized it, built upon it, and made revolutionary advances themselves. The book argues it served as a bridge between the knowledge of the ancients and Renaissance Europe, but also laid the foundation for today's modern scientific world.
Let's start with mathematics. It seems foundational.
Absolutely. For Muslim thinkers, math wasn't just calculation. It was seen as a sacred science, a way to understand the underlying numerical principles that dictate the natural rules of the world, and thus appreciate God's power and creation more deeply.
Who were the key figures? Al-Khwarizmi.
He's central. Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, a Persian scholar at the House of Wisdom in 9th century Baghdad. His huge contribution was adopting and popularizing the Indian numeral system 1, 2, 3, what we use today. It made complex calculations so much easier than Roman numerals.
And he introduced zero.
He didn't invent zero. The concept existed in India, but he incorporated it systematically. It was crucial. It revolutionized existing math and helped invent new fields.
Like algebra?
Exactly. His book, The Compendious Book on Calculation by Completion and Balancing, basically established algebra as a distinct mathematical discipline. He showed how equations could solve practical everyday problems, inheritance calculations, land surveying, trade. The very word algebra comes from his term al-jab, meaning completion or restoration.
Any other major mathematicians?
Omar Khayyam in the 11th, 12th century. Most know him for his poetry, the Rubaiyat.
Right.
But he was also a brilliant mathematician. He worked on solving cubic equations, formulated the binomial theorem. These more theoretical advances paved the way for things like trigonometry and calculus.
And trigonometry had practical uses.
Very practical, especially for Muslims. Al-Battani developed it in the 10th century, partly to calculate exact positions on Earth, and, critically, the Qibla, the precise direction to Mecca for daily prayers. They created handbooks listing coordinates for cities across the Muslim world so people knew exactly which way to face. Many old mosques still point perfectly towards Mecca because of these calculations. And the basic principles they developed are still fundamental to modern GPS.
Amazing. Okay, from math to astronomy, a natural progression.
Very natural. The math provided the tools, and Islamic belief provided the motivation. The Quran itself has verses talking about the sun, moon, stars, their precise calculation, and how they guide humanity. This spurred scientific study.
And they made a key distinction.
Yes, Muslims were really the first to rigorously separate scientific astronomy from mythological astrology. They saw them as different things.
Did they accept the Greek models, like Ptolemy's?
They studied Ptolemy's geocentric model Earth at the center very carefully at places like the House of Wisdom, but they quickly realized his calculations had flaws, inaccuracies.
Did they challenge the model itself?
Some did. Al-Biruni in the 11th century actually proposed that the Earth might rotate on its axis as a way to explain the errors in Ptolemy's system. It wasn't fully accepted then, but it was debated. And these debates, these critiques of Ptolemy, eventually filtered into Europe through translated works, influencing Copernicus and Galileo centuries later.
And crucially, these scientists weren't persecuted for questioning established ideas.
Generally, no. Unlike the later European experience, scientific inquiry in the Muslim world during this period was often seen as a form of worship, a way to understand God's magnificent creation. There wasn't the same conflict between science and religion.
Did astronomy have practical applications too?
Definitely. The most important was refining the astrolabe. It was an ancient Greek invention, but Muslim astronomers combined its functions with their incredibly precise calculations. It allowed sailors and travelers to determine their latitude using the stars with unprecedented accuracy.
So it revolutionized navigation.
Completely. It became the standard tool for navigation for centuries, right up until the 1700s. Made the Hajj pilgrimage easier, safer, and boosted trade across the vast Islamic world.
Which leads us nicely into geography.
Yes. The sheer size of the Muslim empire, its relative unity, and the extensive trade networks meant long-distance travel was common and safe. This naturally made Muslims the leading geographers of the Middle Ages.
But they know the Earth was round.
Oh yes, that was known since ancient Greece. What Abbasid geographers did was calculate its size with astonishing accuracy. Using trigonometry and spherical geometry, they got the diameter, about 12,728 kilometers, and circumference, about 39,968 kilometers, incredibly close to modern values, just tiny margins of error without any modern tech. It's remarkable.
They made maps.
They significantly improved on ancient Greek maps, especially Ptolemy's. Muhammad al-Idrisi, working in 12th century Sicily for the Norman king, created an atlas and world map that the book calls unrivaled in its accuracy and detail in the Middle Ages. It wasn't just lines on paper. It included rich cultural and political descriptions, too.
Now, the book mentions something really intriguing, possible pre-Columbus voyages across the Atlantic.
Yes, this is fascinating stuff. Al-Masudi, a 10th century geographer, wrote about a voyage in 889 CE that sailed west from Spain from Delba, the same port Columbus used, for months, found a very large, previously unknown landmass, traded with the people there. He even included this unknown land on his world map.
Wow. Any other accounts?
Al-Idrisi mentioned Muslim sailors landing on an unknown Atlantic island. And Ibn Battuta, the famous traveler, recorded the story of Mansa Abu Bakr of Mali sending a huge fleet of 2,000 ships west into the Atlantic around 1311, none of which returned.
So not definitive proof.
Not definitive archaeological proof, no, but these are accounts from respected geographers known for their accuracy. They seriously challenge the standard narrative and suggest possibilities that, as the book says, could entirely rewrite the accepted history of the Age of Discovery. Really makes you think.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift to medicine, another area of major advancement.
Huge advancements. It really dispels the myth that medicine before the modern era was just guesswork. There was a long, rich tradition in the Muslim world, building on Greek knowledge, but crucially emphasizing empirical study, observation, and clinical professionalism. It truly forms the basis of modern medicine.
Who are the key figures here? Al-Razi.
Al-Razi, a 9th-10th century Persian physician, was revolutionary. He rejected superstition and supernatural causes for illness. He focused on observable factors, internal and external, and developed specific cures based on evidence. His encyclopedia, The Virtuous Life, stressed that doctors needed to be dedicated, constantly learning. He also saw medicine as sacred, famously treating poor patients for free in Baghdad's hospitals. His works were standard guides for centuries.
And then there's Ibn Sina, or Avicenna, probably the most famous.
Probably the most well-known in the West, yes. Early 11th century. He applied a rigorous, rational, logical approach. He theorized that the body works through causal chains, cause and effect. He concluded diseases could spread through air, water, soil, and that each needed a specific treatment.
He pioneered experimental medicine, too.
He did. He insisted drugs be tested under controlled conditions before use, not just based on theory. His masterpiece, The Canon of Medicine, was the standard medical textbook in both the Muslim world and Europe for over 600 years, right into the 17th century. It was even translated into Chinese.
What did he cover?
Everything. Anesthesia, breast cancer, rabies, poisons, ulcers, kidney disease, tuberculosis. It was incredibly comprehensive.
And even touched on psychology.
Remarkably, yes. He wrote about the link between mental and physical health, noting how negative thoughts or emotions could actually cause physical illness. This predates figures like Freud and Jung by centuries, a really holistic view.
Were there actual hospitals supporting this?
Yes. This is another crucial development. The Muslim world established some of history's first proper hospitals, starting in Baghdad in the early 9th century. They were designed to provide affordable, often free, health care, especially for the poor.
What were they like?
Surprisingly modern. They had dozens of doctors and nurses, different departments with specialists, surgeons, physicians, specific wards for different conditions like outpatient, psychiatric, surgery, maternity. Free care was common, reflecting that prophetic emphasis on compassion. These hospitals spread quickly to Cairo, Damascus, Mecca, Granada.
So the Ottomans continued this tradition later.
They did, and Europe eventually caught up, partly by translating hundreds of these Arabic medical texts during the Renaissance. They learned directly from Muslim giants like Al-Razi and Ibn Sina, who themselves had built upon the Greeks. Modern medicine's roots are deeply intertwined with this cross-cultural intellectual exchange.
Okay, moving on to physics. How did Muslims approach understanding the physical world?
They applied mathematical theories to the real world, aiming to understand the principles by which God governs the universe. They built on ancient Greek and other advances, but like in medicine, they placed a much stronger emphasis on observation and experimentation.
Ibn al-Haytham is the key figure here.
Absolutely. Al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham, often known as Al-Hazan in the West, lived 965–1040. Originally from Iraq, moved to Cairo. He did some of his most important work while under house arrest, focusing intensely on optics, the science of light.
What did he challenge?
He took on Ptolemy's long-held theory that light is emitted from the eye, allowing us to see. Ibn al-Haytham rejected this based on observation and experiment, not just philosophical argument.
What was his theory?
He concluded that light rays bounce off objects and travel into the eye. The eye then processes these rays, and the brain interprets them as images. He conducted experiments built on anatomical studies being done around the same time by Ibn Sina, showing that collaborative spirit again.
His book of optics was groundbreaking.
Hugely influential. He argued light travels in straight lines. He built the first camera obscura, a dark box with a tiny hole that projects an inverted image onto the opposite wall, demonstrating how light works. It's the precursor to the modern camera.
He even calculated the atmosphere's depth.
Yes. By combining optics and astronomy, he calculated how thick the Earth's atmosphere was based on how sunlight refracts at sunset. His calculation was remarkably accurate, later verified by spacecraft.
So his contributions were vast.
Immense. Optics, motion, geometry, calculus, astronomy, even experimental psychology. But the book argues his single greatest legacy was formalizing the scientific method.
Oh, so.
His absolute insistence on observation and experimentation as the basis for scientific theory rather than just philosophical reasoning. That rigorous, evidence-based approach is the foundation of all modern science.
And his motivation was religious.
Deeply so, he wrote, "I constantly sought knowledge and truth. For gaining access to the effulgence and closeness to God, there is no better way than that of searching for truth and knowledge. Science was a path to understanding God's creation."
Did his work lead to practical inventions?
It laid the groundwork. Later Muslim scientists and engineers built on his principles, developing things like crankshafts, water pumps, eyeglasses, compasses, even early gliders. Al-Jazari in the 12th century designed incredibly complex, water-powered robots.
And this knowledge flowed to Europe eventually.
Yes. When Islamic scientific creativity started to decline, partly due to the Crusades and Mongols, Europe was entering its Renaissance and began translating these works. Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, they were all familiar with and influenced by Islamic scientific literature. It's a clear continuity.
Okay, so alongside these physical sciences, there was also intense development within the Islamic sciences themselves. Chapter 6 looks at this.
Exactly. Running parallel to the work in math, astronomy, medicine, you had scholars developing disciplines focused on interpreting the Quran and the Prophet's example, the Sunnah.
How was this framework understood?
A famous hadith provides a good structure. The Prophet defined Islam as the practical pillars, prayer, fasting, etc. Iman as the core beliefs in God, angels, books, messengers, judgment day, destiny. And Ihsan as a deeper spiritual awareness, worshiping God as if you see him or knowing he sees you. The Islamic sciences deal with unpacking all of these.
Let's start with fiqh, or jurisprudence. How did that develop?
It emerged as scholars worked to clarify how God's law, the Sharia, should be applied to everyday life consistently and justly. The absolute focus was on the primary sources, the Quran and the Sunnah, the Prophet's example.
And different schools of thought emerged.
Yes. The four major Sunni schools, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali, developed over time. Importantly, their differences on legal details were generally seen not as a problem, but as a mercy for the community, providing flexibility for different contexts and circumstances.
How did they ensure consistency?
Through ijma, or scholarly consensus. The idea was that the collective agreement of qualified scholars on a ruling would prevent individual interpretations from causing chaos and ensure stability in the law. It became a vital tool.
Okay, then hadith, the Prophet's sayings and actions. Why were these so important?
They were essential for understanding the practical application of the Quran and for deriving specific laws not explicitly detailed in the Quran. The Quran often gives principles. The hadith provide the specifics.
How are they preserved?
Initially, mostly through oral transmission. But later, scholars undertook a monumental effort to collect, compile, and rigorously authenticate thousands upon thousands of these narrations. Figures like Al-Bukhari and Muslim developed sophisticated methods to distinguish genuine hadith from fabricated ones. This painstaking work ensured the Prophet's Sunnah was reliably preserved.
And the Quran itself, its preservation was key.
Absolutely central. During the Prophet's lifetime, revelations were written down on various materials and, crucially, memorized completely by numerous companions. The Arab tradition of memorizing long poems really helped here.
And its finality was confirmed.
Yes, by that verse revealed near the end of his life. Today, I have perfected for you your religion. Quran 5.3. This signaled that the divine message was complete, perfectly preserved, needing no further alteration or addition.
Now, Aqidah, or theology. This sounds like a more contentious area.
Much more so than fiqh. Differences in legal interpretation were usually tolerated, but divergences in core beliefs, aqidah, were seen as potentially threatening one's salvation and the unity of Islam itself. So the debates were often much more intense.
Who were the first group to cause major theological waves?
The Kharijites, back in the 7th century, during the conflict around Ali, to justify assassinating him, they developed the radical idea that committing a major sin automatically made someone an unbeliever and apostate.
How did the mainstream react?
The vast majority of scholars rejected this. People like Abu Hanifa argued strongly against it, stating clearly, "We do not charge any believer with unbelief for any sin he commits." They maintained a distinction between faith and actions, which the Kharijites blurred.
Then came the Mu'tazila in the 9th century.
Yes, a very different challenge. They were rationalists, emphasizing human reason, sometimes even above revelation. They argued the Quran was created in time, not God's eternal, uncreated word, a major clash with traditional views. They also used logic to argue God couldn't forgive all sinners because it would be unfair.
And they gained political backing.
For a time, yes. Caliph al-Ma'mun actually made Mu'tazili ideology the official state doctrine and launched an inquisition, the Mina, to force scholars to accept it.
Who resisted?
The most famous opponent was Ahmad ibn Hanbal. He staunchly refused to accept that the Quran was created or that God's attributes should be subjected to human rationalization. He insisted God is as he described himself in the Quran. He was imprisoned and tortured but became a symbol of resistance against both the Mu'tazili ideas and government overreach in religious matters.
So how was Mu'tazilism eventually countered intellectually?
While Ibn Hanbal's traditionalism, a Athari school, persisted, the main intellectual counter came from the Ash'ari and Maturidi schools, founded in the 10th century. They skillfully used the tools of logic and reason like the Mu'tazila did, but crucially, they used them to explain and defend traditional Islamic beliefs based on revelation, not to reinterpret or overrule revelation with reason.
That's a key distinction.
A fundamental one. As the book puts it, for Ash'aris and Maturidius, reason had to correspond with revelation, whereas for the Mu'tazila, revelation had to correspond with their reason.
Did Mu'tazilism fade away?
Yes, over the 10th and 11th centuries. The Inquisition ended, they fragmented internally, and scholars like the famous Al-Ghazali wrote powerful refutations. Eventually, the Athari, Hanbali, Ash'ari, and Maturidi schools became recognized as the three canonical schools of Sunni theology, al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the people of tradition and community, and they remain so today.
Okay, so that covers the main developments in Sunni thought. What about Shi'ism? You mentioned its political origins earlier.
Right. While the majority accepted the Sunni path, a significant minority held that Ali and his descendants had the sole legitimate right to lead the Muslim community after the Prophet. They became known as the Shi'at Ali, the party of Ali, or simply Shia.
Their core issue was the legitimacy of the first caliphs.
It started there. They questioned Abu Bakr's election, pointing out Ali wasn't present. They came to view Abu Bakr and Umar as usurpers who had denied the Prophet's family their rightful, divinely ordained leadership. Instead of the caliphate, they believed in the imamate leadership restricted to Muhammad's descendants through his daughter Fatima and Ali. Ali was the first imam, his sons Hassan and Hussein the second and third, and so on.
How did this political difference become a distinct religious one?
A key step was their rejection of hadith narrated by those who supported the first caliph's figures like Aisha or Abu Huraira, who are major sources for Sunnis. If Abu Bakr and Umar were illegitimate, the Shia argued, then narrations from their supporters couldn't be trusted.
That would leave a huge gap in religious guidance.
It would. To fill that void, Shia theology elevated the status and sayings of their imams to a level nearly equal to the Prophet's. They developed the doctrine that the imams, because of their lineage, were infallible interpreters of the faith, possessing special divine knowledge. This concept was often influenced by external ideas like Neoplatonic philosophy. This infallibility of the imams is a major point of divergence from Sunni Islam.
Are there different branches within Shi'ism?
Yes. The largest group today is the Twelvers, or Ithna Ashariya. They believe in a line of 12 imams. The 12th Imam, Muhammad al-Mahdi, is believed to have gone into hiding, or occultation, around 874 CE, first minor, then greater occultation from 941. Twelvers await his return as a messianic figure. Until then, they derive guidance from the Quran, the Hadith they accept, and the teachings of the Imams, and historically they tended towards political quietism.
What about other branches?
There are the Seveners, or Ismailis, who recognize only the first 7 Imams. Historically, they were much more politically active and successful, founding major states. And the Zaydis, who recognize 5 imams, are generally considered the closest to mainstream Sunni Islam in their beliefs and practices.
How did the Sunni majority view these developments?
Generally with great concern. Mainstream scholars saw the Shia elevation of imams and rejection of widely accepted hadith as a grave danger to Islam itself. They argued it undermined Islam's claim to be the final, uncorrupted divine message, making it seem more like previous religions whose messages had allegedly been altered over time.
You mentioned the Ismailis were more politically active. Tell us about the Fatimid Caliphate.
Right, this is the major political manifestation of Ismaili Shiism. Unlike the Twelvers, the Ismailis believed in taking political action to establish their vision of Islam. They operated as an underground movement for a long time, spreading their message through missionaries while evading Abbasid persecution.
And they succeeded in establishing a state.
Dramatically so. In 909 CE, they established the Fatimid Caliphate in Tunisia, naming it after the Prophet's daughter, Fatima, to emphasize their lineage claim. They rapidly conquered North Africa.
And they challenged the Abbasids directly.
Yes, they set up a rival caliphate. For a period in the 900s, you actually had 3 rival caliphs: the Abbasids Baghdad, the Fatimids, and the Umayyad survivor state in Cordoba, Spain.
Did the Fatimids expand further?
Their biggest prize was Egypt, which they conquered in 969 CE. They defeated the local rulers and founded a new capital city, Al-Qahira, Cairo, which means the victorious. For a time, the book notes, the Fatimids were arguably the most powerful state in the Muslim world.
Did they manage to take Baghdad?
They tried, but ultimately failed. They were distracted by Byzantine threats in Syria and, ironically, attacks from even more extreme Ismaili splinter groups like the Qarmatians. This failure gave the Sunni world, particularly under the rising Seljuk Turks, time to consolidate and push back. So the Fatimids were largely contained to North Africa, Egypt, the Holy Cities for a time, and parts of Syria-Palestine.
Did they try to spread Ismailism within their empire?
Very actively. They founded Al-Azhar University in Cairo in 970, initially as a major center for Ismaili propaganda. There were also periods where they actively persecuted Sunni Muslims, as well as Christians and Jews, although policies varied.
But their influence eventually waned.
Yes. The Sunni world recovered, particularly under the Seljuks. The Fatimid Caliphate grew weaker internally. Eventually, Saladin abolished it entirely in 1171, and Al-Azhar. It was transformed into the leading center of Sunni Islamic learning it remains today, a remarkable turnaround.
Okay, that covers the internal dynamics and schisms. Now, Chapter 7, Upheaval. Crusades and Mongols. This deals with major external shocks.
Huge shocks that profoundly reshaped the Muslim world. First, the Crusades. These really emerged from the context of Turkic migrations.
Tell us about the Turks.
Nomadic peoples from Central Asia, renowned warriors. They migrated into the Islamic world starting around the 9th-10th centuries and gradually converted to Islam. The weakening Abbasids increasingly relied on them as soldiers and generals.
Which led to the Seljuk Empire.
Yes. By 1037, the Seljuk Turks had established a vast, stable empire stretching from Syria to Central Asia. They became the de facto rulers, protecting the powerless Abbasid caliph in Baghdad. Importantly, they were staunch Sunni Muslims, providing a strong counterweight to the Shia Fatimids in Egypt.
And they clashed with the Byzantines.
Critically, yes. At the Battle of Manzikert in 1071 in eastern Anatolia, the Seljuks inflicted a devastating defeat on the Byzantines. This battle essentially broke Byzantine power in Anatolia, allowing the Turks to flood into the region, pushing westward and eventually threatening Constantinople itself.
This is what triggered the call for the Crusades.
Directly. The Byzantine Emperor Alexios, seeing his empire crumbling, appealed to Pope Urban II in Rome for military aid against the Turks in 1095. He probably expected a limited force of mercenaries.
But Pope Urban had bigger ideas.
Much bigger. He saw an opportunity to rally a massive pan-European Christian army, not just to help Byzantium, but to conquer the Holy Land itself. He called for the liberation of Jerusalem from Muslim rule that had existed since Caliph Umar's time, and the establishment of Latin Christian kingdoms there, under papal authority.
How did the First Crusade unfold?
It mobilized slowly, starting around 1096. Driven by intense religious fervor, some crusaders tragically massacred Jewish communities in Europe along the way. Emperor Alexios was wary of this huge, unruly force and didn't let them into Constantinople. They marched across Anatolia, which the fragmented Seljuk successor states couldn't effectively resist.
And they reached Jerusalem.
Yes, in 1099. They conquered the city after a siege, committing a brutal massacre of Muslim and Jewish inhabitants. This led to the establishment of 4 crusader states along the coast, the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the counties of Antioch, Edessa, and Tripoli.
How did the Muslim world initially respond?
Very poorly. It was fragmented. You had petty Turkish emirs fighting each other in Syria, the Taifa kings squabbling in Spain. This disunity was a major reason the Crusaders were able to gain a foothold and survive.
But eventually, A more unified response emerged.
Yes, starting with the Zengid dynasty in Syria. Imad al-Din Zengi, and especially his son Nur al-Din Zengi, began the process of unifying Muslim Syria against the Crusaders. Nur al-Din's capture of Damascus in 1154 was a crucial step.
And this is where Saladin enters the picture.
Exactly. Nur al-Din sent an army to Egypt in 1164, partly to counter Crusader incursions there and also to deal with the weakening Fatimid regime. His nephew, Salah al-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub Saladin, eventually rose to become the vizier, the chief minister, in Egypt in 1169.
And he abolished the Fatimid Caliphate.
In 1171, Saladin was a staunch Sunni. He ended the heterodox Fatimid rule, brought Egypt firmly back into the Sunni fold, and crucially, redirected its resources toward the common cause against the Crusaders. Al-Azhar became a Sunni university. This move was popular in Egypt.
What happened after Nur al-Din died?
Nur al-Din died in 1174. Saladin then moved north and, largely unopposed, took control of Syria as well. For the first time in centuries, Egypt and Syria were united under a single, powerful Sunni ruler.
Which surrounded the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem.
Completely surrounded it. And just at this moment, Crusader unity was, as the book says, at an all-time low due to internal squabbles. Saladin, meanwhile, felt it was his religious duty to liberate Jerusalem.
The breaking point was the Battle of Hattin.
In 1187, after repeated provocations by some Crusader lords who broke truces, Saladin launched a major offensive. At Hattin, he lured the main Crusader army into a waterless trap and utterly destroyed it. The king of Jerusalem himself was captured. Crusader military power in the region was broken.
And Jerusalem fell soon after.
Yes, after a relatively short siege. But Saladin's conduct was starkly different from the Crusaders in 1099. His terms were lenient, lives were spared, ransom was allowed, churches were protected, Christian pilgrims were still permitted access. And there are even famous stories of chivalry and mutual respect between Saladin and Crusader leaders like Richard the Lionheart.
Did the Crusades end there?
No, they continued in various forms for another century or more, but after Saladin's victories and the reunification he achieved, they never again became a major threat to the Muslim world. His Ayyubid dynasty continued to rule Egypt and Syria.
Okay, so the Crusader threat was contained. But then came an even bigger shock from the east, the Mongols.
A catastrophe on a whole different scale. Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes in the early 13th century, driven by a vision of relentless military expansion. His methods were brutal terror, psychological warfare, massacres, pyramids of skulls. He created the largest land empire ever seen.
Which Muslim state bordered them?
The Khwarezmian Empire, ruling over Persia and Central Asia. It had emerged from the collapse of the Seljuk Empire. There was some tension between the Khwarezmian Shah and the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad at the time.
How did the Mongol invasion start?
Genghis Khan initially wanted peaceful trade, but when the governor of a Khwarezmian border city foolishly killed Mongol merchants and envoys, Genghis was enraged. He unleashed his armies in 1219.
And the Khwarezmians couldn't stop them.
Not even close. The Mongol hordes swept through Central Asia and Persia with terrifying speed and brutality. Great cities like Bukhara and Samarkand were utterly destroyed, their populations massacred.
This wave continued westward.
Yes. Genghis Khan's grandson, Hulagu, led a second massive invasion force westward in the 1250s. His army included Christian allies and advisors. Their target, Baghdad, the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate.
The fall of Baghdad in 1258. The book calls it one of the most devastating events in Islamic history.
Understatement. The city had been the Abbasid capital for 500 years, the intellectual center of the Islamic world. The Caliph, al-Mustasim, was weak, and the Muslim states failed to unite against the threat. Hulagu besieged the city, and it fell in just a week.
What happened then?
Unimaginable devastation. The entire Muslim population was massacred. Estimates range from 200,000 to over 1 million killed. Christians were largely spared, due to Hulagu's wife and some advisors being Christian. The House of Wisdom, with its priceless collection of knowledge, was destroyed. Countless books on science, math, history, philosophy were dumped into the Tigris River, the ink turning the river black. An incalculable loss. The Caliph himself was rolled in a carpet and trampled to death by horses.
So the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad was finished.
Utterly destroyed as a political and cultural center. A shadow caliphate continued under Mamluk protection in Egypt, but it had no real power. Baghdad's destruction was a psychic blow to the entire Muslim world.
Did the Mongols stop there?
No, Hulagu pushed on into Syria, taking Aleppo and Damascus. Christians were allowed to hold mass in the Umayyad mosque. It seemed like nothing could stop them from conquering Egypt and perhaps extinguishing Islamic civilization.
But they were stopped.
Miraculously, yes, by the young Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. At the Battle of Ain Jalut, the spring of Goliath in Palestine in 1260, the Mamluk Sultan Baybars, himself of Turkic origin and familiar with Mongol tactics, used their own strategies against them and inflicted their first major defeat in the Muslim world. The book states this victory meant Egypt, and perhaps Islam itself, was saved from Mongol atrocities. It was a crucial turning point.
Were there other factors that helped?
Yes, a Mongol civil war broke out soon after. Berk Khan, the Mongol ruler in Russia, had converted to Islam. He allied with the Mamluks against Hulagu in Persia. This fragmentation provided a vital reprieve and halted the westward Mongol advance. By the late 1200s, the Mongol Empire had fractured, and the immediate existential threat receded.
What was the aftermath for the Muslim world?
Devastation. Civilization survived, but it was a shadow of the former glory. Persia and Iraq were ruined, Syria ravaged. The holy cities had narrowly escaped destruction. It was truly one of the worst times in Islamic history, leading to deep despair and theological questioning.
How did Muslims make sense of this catastrophe, believing in a perfect religion yet being crushed by pagans?
It caused a real crisis of faith for some, but influential theologians like Ibn Taymiyyah, who lived 1263–1328, rose to address it. He argued forcefully that the problem wasn't Islam itself. There was never anything wrong with Islam. The problem, he said, was that Muslims digressed from the correct practice of it.
So, a call for internal reform.
Exactly. Like Al-Ghazali before him, Ibn Taymiyyah sought to purge Islam of what he saw as harmful innovations, excessive Sufi mysticism, philosophical speculation that deviated from the sources, anything resembling polytheism. He was also fiercely critical of rulers who didn't uphold Islamic law, which got him imprisoned multiple times.
But his ideas offered hope.
Yes. The idea that if Muslims returned to the pure and unaltered version of Islam of the early generations, they could regain God's favor and rise again. This call for revival resonated deeply, and that rebirth, interestingly, would eventually emerge not from the devastated heartlands, but from the northwest frontier with the Ottomans.
Okay, this sets up part 3, global reach and modern challenges. We start with Chapter 8 on Al-Andalus, Islam in the West. It's important not just to focus on the Middle East, right?
Absolutely crucial. Al-Andalus, Muslim Iberia, is where Islamic civilization had this centuries-long complex interaction directly with Christian Europe. It produced a unique society, both Muslim and Western European.
How did Islam get established there so quickly back in the 8th century?
We touched on this. Both Muslims and Christians saw it in religious terms, God's will or God's punishment. But practically speaking, the Visigothic kingdom was deeply unpopular and fractured. King Roderick faced desertions, few cities resisted strongly after the initial Muslim victory at Guadalete, and the Muslims offered better terms than the Visigoths had.
How did settlement work there? Was it different from the East?
Yes, less organized, no big garrison cities initially. Muslims settled throughout the peninsula, owning land. Berbers tended towards the pastoral north and west, Arabs from Yemen towards the fertile south, and cities like Cordoba. And there was significant intermarriage, creating that unique hybrid Arab-Berber-Hispanic culture.
And Al-Andalus had its own golden age.
Oh, definitely. Especially during the 10th century under the Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba, established by Abd al-Rahman III, the survivor who escaped the Abbasids. Cordoba became the intellectual and cultural jewel of Europe. Huge libraries, hundreds of thousands of books, way more than anywhere else in Europe then. Scholars of all faiths worked together.
Maimonides, the Jewish philosopher, was there.
He flourished in that atmosphere of relative tolerance and intellectual vibrancy. It was a remarkable period of peace, prosperity, and cross-cultural exchange.
But it didn't last. The Taifa period saw decline.
Tragically, yes. By the early 11th century, the Umayyad Caliphate fractured due to internal power struggles. Infighting became constant. Rivals focused on each other, not external threats.
And they even brought in outsiders to help.
Yes, a disastrous pattern. Factions hired Christian mercenaries from the north or Berber troops from North Africa to fight other Muslims. The book gives the example of Suleiman II using Castilian and Berber troops to overthrow a rival. Retaliation followed retaliation. The once tolerant and stable society was quickly sinking under the mud of power struggles and civil war.
So Al-Andalus broke apart.
Completely dissolved into numerous small warring kingdoms called taifas. Decades of civil war ruined the country. Contemporaries like the scholar Ibn Hazm wrote despairingly about the destruction of their civilization.
Who benefited from this chaos?
Only the Christian kingdoms to the north, Castile, Leon, Navarre. They ruthlessly exploited Muslim disunity, steadily expanding their territory and wealth. Incredibly, Taifa kings actually paid Christian kings to attack other Taifa kings. A truly dark chapter, as the book calls it. The fall of the great city of Toledo to Castile in 1085 was a huge symbolic and strategic blow.
But there was a temporary rescue from North Africa,
Yeah.
the Almoravids.
Yes, the Murabitan, a strict Berber Islamic reform movement from the Sahara. The desperate Taifa kings appealed to them for help against the relentless advance of Alfonso VI of Castile.
And they helped.
Their leader, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, crossed into Spain and decisively defeated Alfonso at the Battle of Zalaca in 1086. Initially, he just helped and went back to Africa, not wanting to get bogged down in Andalusian politics.
But he came back.
He had to. The Taifa kings remained weak and divided. Alfonso regrouped. Yusuf was called back a third time. This time, armed with a fatwa, a legal ruling, from the famous theologian Al-Ghazali declaring the Taifa kings corrupt and unfit, Yusuf conquered Al-Andalus himself around 1090. He ended the Taifa period, exiled the petty kings, and unified Muslim Spain under Murabitun rule.
Was this foreign rule accepted?
Surprisingly, yes. The Andalusians were desperate for stability and protection from the Christians, and the Murabitun message of returning to a pure Islam, getting rid of corruption and unfair taxes, resonated. The book highlights this recurring theme. In times of crisis, Muslims often rally around a strong leader, promising unity and a return to core principles, even if that leader is foreign. It happened with Saladin, the Ottomans absorbing Turkish principalities, and here with the Murabitun. Better Berber Muslims than Spanish Christians was the thinking.
Did the Murabitun revival last?
Not permanently. They stemmed the tide for a while but couldn't regain lost territory. Yusuf's son, Ali, lacked his father's drive. Christian victories resumed. Murabitun popularity waned. Rebellions broke out. And crucially, their downfall came from North Africa itself.
Another Berber movement, the Almohads.
Exactly, the Muwahhidun, another religious reform movement originating in the Atlas Mountains. Their founder, Ibn Tumart, preached that the Murabitun had become decadent and deviated from true Islam. They emphasized strict monotheism and opposed innovations.
And they took over Morocco.
Yes, Berber tribes switched allegiance, Marrakesh fell in 1147, and the Murabitun Empire in Africa collapsed. This preoccupied the Murabitun, allowing Al-Andalus to slip back into a second Taifa period around 1144. More fragmentation, more Christian gains.
So the Almohads then came to Spain.
Yes, led by Abd al-Mumin. They entered Al-Andalus around 1145, ostensibly to stalk Christian advances, but also to annex territory. By 1150, they held major cities like Seville and Cordoba. By the 1160s, Muslim rule was consolidated under them, but only in the southern part of Iberia. The Central Plains and East Coast were lost for good. The priority became survival, not expansion.
Did the Almohad period see any cultural flourishing?
It did spark an Islamic revival. Scholars emerged. The most famous is Ibn Rushd, or Averroes, a true polymath: philosophy, physics, medicine, law. His comparative fiqh encyclopedia detailing the differences between legal schools is still studied. Mystics like Ibn Arabi also emerged, offering spiritual solace in dark political times.
But the Almohads also declined.
They followed the same pattern as the Murabitun. Initial strength, then internal conflicts, weakening resolve, renewed Christian advances. But this time, critically, no new Berber movement arose from Africa to save them. Al-Andalus was left increasingly vulnerable.
Leading to the final stage, the Emirate of Granada.
The last Muslim state left in Iberia, ruled by the Nasrid dynasty from the 13th to the 15th century. Located in the mountainous south, it became a refuge for Muslims fleeing the Christian reconquest. But its existence, as the book notes, signaled the beginning of the end.
Was it truly independent?
Not really. It survived precariously by paying tribute huge amounts of gold, often sourced from Mali in West Africa, to the powerful Kingdom of Castile. They even had to provide military aid to Castile against other remaining Muslim towns. A tragic situation.
So they were economically dependent too.
Increasingly so. Italian city-states dominated their trade. They were cut off from the rest of the Muslim world. All this just strengthened their Christian neighbors.
And the final fall came in 1492.
A landmark year. Ferdinand and Isabella had united the main Spanish Christian kingdoms. They had superior military tech, especially cannons, ironically, similar to how the Ottomans took Constantinople. There was no help from North Africa this time, just symbolic gestures from Egypt. Granada was isolated.
Was internal weakness a factor too?
Definitely. The last Nasrid ruler, Muhammad XII Boabdil, got caught up in a disastrous civil war against his own father and uncle. The Castilians skillfully exploited these divisions. By 1490, Granada stood alone.
What happened after the surrender?
Initially, the terms were lenient. Religious freedom, property rights, no forced conversions were promised. But the Spanish monarchs soon encouraged conversions through incentives. When they discovered many converts were still practicing Islam secretly, the policy shifted brutally.
Forced conversions and expulsion.
Yes, a direct violation of the surrender treaties. Muslims, along with Jews, were forced to convert or leave Spain. The idea of convivencia, coexistence, as the book says, never truly materialized in the long term. 1492 marked the definitive end of almost 800 years of Muslim rule in Iberia.
A sobering end to that chapter. Now, Chapter 9 looks at Islam on the edge, its global reach beyond the traditional heartlands.
Yes, this is crucial for a full picture. Focusing only on the Middle East misses so much rich, diverse history in places like Sub-Saharan Africa, China, Southeast Asia. These regions show the complex ways Islam interacted with other cultures.
Let's start with West Africa. How did Islam spread there?
Differently than in North Africa, south of the Sahara, Islam diffused gradually along the trans-Saharan trade routes, carried by nomadic Berber merchants, primarily the Tuareg. The great West African kingdoms were clustered around the Niger River, relying on trade in gold and salt.
So it's spread by merchants, not conquerors.
Primarily, yes. Muslim merchants settled in trading cities like Timbuktu and Gao. Islam spread slowly, organically. West Africans often adopted Islam but blended it with their existing beliefs and practices for generations. It wasn't imposed politically. It slowly diffused into the local culture, adapting as it went.
When did native Muslim kingdoms emerge?
The first major one was the Mali Empire, founded in the 13th century by Sundiata Keita, the legendary Lion King, who himself was partially Islamized. Mali became incredibly wealthy and powerful, especially under Mansa Musa.
Mansa Musa and his famous Hajj in 1324.
The ultimate display of wealth. His caravan had 60,000 people, 12,000 attendants each, carrying pounds of gold. He gave away so much gold in Cairo that he caused inflation for over a decade. It put Mali on the map for the entire Muslim world.
But his trip was about more than just gold.
Much more. Mali was still integrating Islam with local traditions. Mansa Musa realized they needed deeper Islamic scholarship, so he used his immense wealth to bring back leading scholars, teachers, and artists from across the Muslim world. Arab lands, Persia, Al-Andalus.
Importing knowledge.
Exactly. He consciously created a West African Islamic culture with strong links to the wider Muslim world. This catapulted Mali to the forefront of learning. Just as Baghdad was declining after the Mongol invasion, the book says a new hub of scholarship arose in the West African savannah.
And Timbuktu became the center.
Yes. Strategically located, a major trade hub, Mansa Musa built palaces, mosques, universities there. He sent Malian scholars to Morocco for advanced studies. Timbuktu became such a renowned center of Islamic knowledge that scholars from the Middle East actually traveled there to study. Imagine, a scholar from the Hijaz needing prerequisites in Morocco just to qualify to study in Timbuktu.
That's incredible. Now, the chapter also touches on a painful subject: Muslim slaves in the Americas.
Yes, it's an often overlooked part of the transatlantic slave trade history. European colonizers needed labor, and they sourced it from sub-Saharan Africa, often by trading weapons with local African rulers who captured people from rival groups. A devastating process that caused complete political destruction in some regions.
How many enslaved Africans were Muslim?
Estimates vary, but the book suggests between 3 and 6 million out of the total 15-20 million brought to the Americas were Muslim.
What was their experience like?
Horrific, obviously. Subjugation, brutal conditions. Practicing Islam was incredibly difficult. Daily prayers, fasting, Hajj, impossible. Learning was restricted. Over generations, Islamic knowledge inevitably faded due to this forced separation from the Muslim world.
Did their background give them any advantages, however small?
Sometimes. Muslim slaves were often more educated, more literate than others, sometimes even their owners. This meant they were sometimes used for tasks like accounting or plantation management.
And it helped them organize.
Yes. Their literacy and shared identity allowed them to plan resistance. The book mentions a major revolt planned by Muslim scholars in Bahia, Brazil in 1835, using secret notes written in Arabic. It was suppressed, but it terrified the authorities so much that many Muslims were actually deported back to Africa.
But ultimately, the community couldn't sustain itself.
Not under those conditions. By the mid-1800s, the distinct Muslim community had largely disintegrated in places like the U.S., but the memory wasn't entirely lost. In the 20th century, you see a powerful revival, movements like the Nation of Islam, and later figures like Malcolm X and W.D. Muhammad leading many African Americans back towards mainstream Islam, reclaiming that lost heritage.
Okay, let's move to East Africa. Islam arrived there early, too.
Very early. Trade links with Arabia existed before Islam. And crucially, some of the Prophet's first followers found refuge from persecution in Mecca by fleeing to Aksum in modern Ethiopia. And Bilal, the first muezzin, was himself Ethiopian.
So Islam spread through trade here, too.
Primarily, yes. Along the Indian Ocean coast, Yemeni merchants settled in coastal cities from the 700s, 800s onwards. Mosques from the 10th century found in Kenya, Islam well established in Tanzania by the 13th. Local rulers welcomed Muslim traders.
Was the conversion pattern different from West Africa?
Somewhat. It wasn't large migrations, but rather regular contact and settlement by traders. Wealthy merchants often intermarried with local women. They assimilated into local culture, but added Islam to the mix. The book calls it a genuine intermixing of cultures.
Creating the Swahili culture.
Exactly. Swahili, a Bantu language, became the lingua franca, absorbing lots of Arabic words but remaining African. People adopted elements of Arab and Persian culture, but Islam didn't erase local traditions, it blended with them.
And powerful city-states emerged.
Yes, trading hubs like Mogadishu, Kilwa, Mombasa became influential players in the Indian Ocean network. Ibn Battuta visited in the 14th century and was impressed by their piety, their mosques, the importance given to religious scholars by rulers.
And Islam felt native there.
That seems to be the key point. It wasn't seen as a foreign imposition. The stories of Bilal, the early refuge in Abyssinia, these created an identity that was simultaneously Islamic and African. It was influenced by Arabia, Persia, India through trade, but unified by a shared faith that felt deeply rooted.
Now, China. How did Islam take root there?
Again, very early contact. Remember, Caliph Uthman sent an ambassador, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, to the Tang dynasty around 650 CE. But a permanent presence really began in the 750s, when Muslim soldiers were invited by the Tang emperor to help suppress a rebellion.
And they stayed.
Yes, they were encouraged to settle, intermarry. They found a niche in military and government service, a role Chinese Muslims often continued to fill for centuries.
Were there cultural barriers?
Significant ones. Buddhism and Confucianism are very different from Abrahamic monotheism. Unlike in Christian or Jewish lands, there wasn't that shared history. So Muslim communities often lived in distinct enclaves, which actually helped them maintain their Islamic identity and connections to the wider Muslim world through trade routes.
Did the Mongols change things?
Dramatically. The Mongol Empire physically linked the Muslim heartlands with China. You had mass migrations of Muslims traders, administrators, soldiers moving east into China, especially as the Mongols valued their skills. Muslims played key roles in administering the vast Mongol Yuan dynasty in China.
And this led to assimilation.
Over time, yes. During the Mongol and succeeding Ming dynasties, Chinese Muslims became much more integrated. They were no longer seen as foreigners, but as a distinct ethnic group, the Hui. They adopted Chinese customs, names, language, but retained their Islamic faith. They continued to serve the empire.
This is the context for Zheng He.
Exactly. The famous Admiral Zheng He, 1371-1433, was a Hui Muslim from Yunnan province. He commanded those enormous treasure fleets for the Ming Emperor on voyages across the Indian Ocean, reaching the Middle East and Africa.
And he helped spread Islam.
Yes, particularly in Southeast Asia, the Malay archipelago. He's a celebrated figure not just in Muslim history, but in all of Chinese history as their greatest explorer. The book calls him emblematic of the nature of Islam in China. Fully Chinese, yet fully Muslim, with no contradiction between the two identities. A fascinating synthesis.
Okay, finally in this chapter, India. A very complex picture there.
Extremely complex. Muslim rule began in earnest with Mahmud of Ghazni, a Turkic ruler based in Afghanistan around the year 1000. He led repeated, often brutal raids into northern India, partly for wealth, partly to spread Sunni Islam. His legacy is controversial, destructive conqueror, but also a patron of arts and sciences, supporting figures like Al-Biruni.
Who came after him?
The Ghurids, also from Afghanistan, captured Delhi in 1192. They relied heavily on Turkic slave soldiers known as Mamluks, and eventually these Mamluks overthrew their Ghurid masters in 1206 and established the Delhi Sultanate,
Which lasted a long time.
until 1526, ruled by 5 successive slave dynasties. It was a unique system. Power wasn't strictly hereditary. Generals and notables often elected or deposed sultans. This prevented complacency but also caused instability.
Did the Delhi Sultans see themselves as independent rulers?
Mostly yes, but they usually acknowledged the symbolic spiritual authority of the distant Abbasid Caliph, even after the Mongols destroyed Baghdad. They sent emissaries seeking recognition. It shows an attempt to maintain a link, however tenuous, with the wider Muslim world.
How did Islam spread under the Sultanate? It was already present on the coast, right?
Yes, through Arab merchants since the 600s, but the Delhi Sultanate provided the political power and patronage for Islam to spread inland significantly.
Was Sufism important here?
Hugely important. Sufi mystics and their orders received royal support. They traveled widely, establishing lodges, and their spiritual devotional approach to Islam appealed greatly to people from Hindu backgrounds, making the transition to Islam's strict monotheism perhaps easier for many.
And different legal schools took root.
Yes, reflecting the different routes of influence. Along the coasts and in the south, connected by sea trade to Yemen and East Africa, the Shafi school was prominent. In the north, influenced by overland connections to Persia and Central Asia, the Hanafi school dominated. India became this incredible melting pot of Islamic traditions.
All right, Chapter 10, Rebirth, the rise of new empires. After the Mongol devastation, Islamic civilization rises again.
In a major way, the book emphasizes these cycles in Islamic history. The rise of the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires in the 15th and 16th centuries marks a spectacular comeback. By the 1520s, the Ottomans especially were a dominant world power, pushing deep into Europe.
Let's focus on the Ottomans first, their origins.
They emerged from the chaos of late 13th century Anatolia after the Seljuk Sultanate there collapsed following Mongol invasions. Small Turkish principalities, beyliks, emerged, often led by Ghazi's warriors for the faith fighting against the crumbling Byzantine Empire. Osman, the founder of the Ottoman dynasty, Osmanli, was one such frontier bey.
And they expanded quickly.
Yes, taking advantage of Byzantine weakness. They captured Byzantine towns, making Bursa their first major capital in 1326. Osman's son, Orhan, continued this Ghazi tradition. Islam was a powerful unifying force for these diverse Turkish groups, and the idea of restoring Islamic glory after the Mongol catastrophe was a strong motivator.
Were they tolerant rulers?
The book argues, yes, remarkably so, especially compared to others at the time. They generally adhered to the Islamic rules of war established way back by Abu Bakr protecting civilians, only fighting soldiers. Local Orthodox Christians often preferred Ottoman rule to the Latin Crusaders, who had previously sacked Byzantine lands. This tolerance was both pragmatic and rooted in Islamic principles.
Who were some key early sultans? Bayezid the Thunderbolt?
Bayezid A's, late 14th century, rapid expansion under him both into Christian Europe, Serbia, Bulgaria, and against rival Turkish states in Anatolia. He even besieged Constantinople.
But he faced a major challenge.
From Timur or Tamerlane, another Turco-Mongol conqueror, himself a Muslim. Timur saw Bayezid's growing power as a threat. They clash at the Battle of Ankara in 1402. Timur crushed the Ottomans and captured Bayezid himself, a massive setback.
Leading to civil war.
Yes, the Ottoman interregnum, 1402-1413. Bayezid's sons fought each other for control. The empire nearly collapsed.
How did they recover?
Mehmet I eventually emerged victorious. The empire reconstituted itself relatively quickly, which speaks to the strength of its underlying institutions. Islam as a unifier, the economic guild system, Akis, linked to Sufi orders, and strong military traditions, especially the Janissaries.
The Janissaries, tell us about them.
They were an elite infantry corps, originally recruited from young Christian boys taken from conquered territories, the Devshirme system. They were converted to Islam, trained rigorously, and became fiercely loyal only to the Sultan. They were a key factor in Ottoman military success and helped unify diverse peoples under the Sultan's banner.
So, after the interregnum, the focus returned to Constantinople.
Yes. Murad II continued pressure on the Byzantines, leaving them with little more than the city itself. He tried to take it but failed. The final conquest fell to his son, Mehmet II.
Mehmet the Conqueror, 1453.
A pivotal year. Constantinople was strategically vital, symbolically huge. Mehmet II meticulously prepared massive cannons designed by a European engineer, a strong navy, a huge army. The Byzantines got some Italian aid, but were internally divided, especially between Orthodox and Catholics. The siege lasted weeks. Finally, the walls were breached, the city fell, the Byzantine Empire was finished. Mehmet earned his title, the Conqueror.
And this ushered in an Ottoman Golden Age.
It did. Continued expansion under Mehmet and his successors. Then came Selim of Ust, early 16th century.
What were his major achievements?
He decisively defeated the new Safavid Empire in Persia at the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514, securing the Ottomans' eastern flank. Then he turned south and conquered the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt and Syria in 1517. This brought the holy cities of Mecca and Medina under Ottoman control.
And the title of Caliph.
Yes, Selim inherited the symbolic Abbasid Caliphate title from the last caliph in Cairo. Although the Ottomans didn't always heavily emphasize the title initially, it added immense prestige. They became the undisputed protectors of Sunni Islam, aiding Muslims globally against rising European power.
How did they govern their diverse empire? The millet system.
Yes, that was key. Non-Muslim religious communities, Orthodox Christians, Armenian Christians, Jews, were allowed to form semi-autonomous millets. They could follow their own religious laws, collect their own taxes, and elect their own leaders who acted as intermediaries with the Ottoman government. It allowed for considerable religious and cultural autonomy within the empire.
The peak of Ottoman power came under Suleiman.
Suleiman the Magnificent, or the Lawgiver, Kanuni, as he's known in the East, reigned 1520-1566. This was the absolute apex, militarily, economically, culturally. He worked with the Grand Mufti Abu Su'd Effendi to codify Ottoman law, streamlining secular laws, Kanun, while ensuring Sharia remained supreme. He lowered taxes on peasants, which actually attracted Christian immigrants fleeing harsher conditions in Europe.
But decline began after him.
Almost immediately after his death in 1566, his son, Selim II, launched an ill-advised invasion of Cyprus, provoking a major European naval response. At the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, a Christian coalition decisively defeated the Ottoman navy, shattering its aura of invincibility at sea. The book marks this as the end of the age of Ottoman conquests. Europe was catching up technologically and socially. The long, slow decline began.
Okay, let's briefly touch on the other two major empires mentioned. Safavid Persia.
Emerged around the same time as the Ottoman peak. Founded by Ismail Surs in the early 1500s, based in Azerbaijan, he unified Persia under his rule.
What was distinctive about the Safavids?
Their imposition of Twelver Shi'ism as the official state religion. Ismail did this quite forcefully, giving the largely Sunni population the choice: convert, flee, or die. He imported Shia scholars to help establish Shi'ism and eradicate the Sunni intellectual legacy. Persia became, and remains, the heartland of the Shia world.
Did they clash with the Ottomans?
Inevitably. Ismail's religious zeal extended beyond his borders. He sent missionaries into Ottoman Anatolia trying to stir up revolt among Shia sympathizers there. This provoked the Ottoman Sultan Selim I.
Leading to the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514.
Yes. The Ottomans, with superior firepower, cannons and muskets, decisively defeated the Safavid cavalry, who relied more on religious fervor. Ismail's aura of invincibility was broken. Selim couldn't hold Safavid territory permanently, but the battle established a relatively stable border between the Sunni Ottoman and Shia Safavid spheres, a division that has echoes even today. Later Safavids, like Shah Abbas I, built a strong gunpowder empire and allied with European powers against the Ottomans.
And the Third Empire, Mughal India.
Founded by Babur, a descendant of Timur, who invaded India from Central Asia and defeated the Delhi Sultanate in 1526.
Who are the key Mughal rulers? Akbar.
Akbar, reigned 1556 to 1605, is perhaps the most famous. Known for his religious tolerance, sponsoring scholars from all backgrounds, hosting interfaith debates with Hindus, Jains, Christians, Jews. He even tried to formulate his own syncretic religion, Din-e-Ilahi, religion of God, aiming to bridge traditions. It focused on ethics rather than divinity.
Was it successful?
Not really. Traditional Muslim scholars were scandalized, seeing it as heresy. It didn't outlive Akbar, but it shows the incredible level of cultural and religious mixing in Mughal India.
Who came after Akbar? Aurangzeb.
Aurangzeb Alamgir, reigned 1658-1707, ruled the empire at its absolute largest extent, known as World Conqueror for his military campaigns. Unlike Akhtar, he was known for his personal piety and orthodox Sunni beliefs. He sponsored Islamic scholarship, famously commissioning the Fatwa Alamgiri, a massive compendium of Hanafi Islamic law for governing India. He disagreed with the lavish spending of his predecessors, like on the Taj Mahal.
Did the Mughal Empire decline after him?
Yes. After Aurangzeb's death, Mughal India faced increasing instability, internal conflicts, and the resurgence of Hindu powers like the Marathas. Much like Al-Andalus centuries earlier, disunity paved the way for decline and eventual foreign domination, in this case by the British.
Okay, chapter 11. Decline. The end of an era. This brings us closer to the modern period, focusing mainly on the Ottoman decline.
Yes, the long decline that started after Suleiman. We already touched on some causes: weak sultans due to the succession policy that kept princes imprisoned and inexperienced. Administration fell to powerful, often corrupt viziers.
And economic challenges.
Huge ones. The influx of silver from the Americas into Europe caused a massive inflation in the Ottoman economy, devaluing their currency. Conquest dried up, so no more booty. Meanwhile, Western Europe was surging ahead economically with mercantilism and early industrialization, making the Ottomans relatively weaker.
And intellectual stagnation.
A critical factor. Ottoman scholars in the 1600s and 1700s tended to look down on European intellectual developments, seeing Europe as backward. They failed to keep up with the Renaissance, the Scientific Revolution, the Enlightenment, ironically, movements partly fueled by translations of earlier Islamic scholarship.
Military weakness, too. The Janissaries.
Yes, the Janissary Corps became hereditary. Sons got positions regardless of ability. Training, discipline, effectiveness plummeted. They went from being the empire's elite fighting force to a powerful, conservative internal lobby resisting reform.
This sets the stage for the Tanzimat reforms in the 19th century.
Right, from 1839-1876, a major effort to modernize the empire and halt the decline, spurred by internal problems and external threats, especially from Russia. Sultan Mahmud II had already begun military reforms, abolishing the Janissaries. His successor, Abdulmajid I, launched the Tanzimat, meaning reorganization.
What was the goal?
To emulate European nation-states. They brought in European experts, adopted European models for almost everything. Modern postal service, national bank, census, tax reform, a kind of proto-parliament, even a national anthem. Education was overhauled along French secular lines, separating science and religion in schools. This had a lasting impact, prioritizing engineering and medicine over humanities and Islamic studies.
And major legal changes.
Yes. The old system of millets and capitulations, special rights for Europeans, created inequalities. The Tanzimat declared all Ottoman citizens legally equal, regardless of religion or ethnicity. The jizya was officially abolished.
But this created new problems: nationalism.
Exactly. Just as the Ottomans were trying to create equal citizenship, Europe was embracing ethno-nationalism. This threatened the multi-ethnic Ottoman Empire. Greek independence in 1830 was an early warning sign.
So they tried Ottomanism.
An attempt to create a unified identity. Everyone's an Ottoman, regardless of being Turk, Arab, Greek, Armenian, etc., but it largely failed. Existing economic inequalities persisted, and making everyone legally equal actually increased tensions in some areas, as Muslim groups felt they'd lost their traditional advantages without gaining true equality in practice. The reforms didn't stop the decline, and the empire sank deeper into debt to European powers.
This led to a backlash. Pan-Islamism under Abdulmajid II.
Yes, Sultan Abdulmajid II reigned 1876 to 1909. He came to power during a disastrous war with Russia, state bankruptcy. He was much more capable and educated than his recent predecessors.
What was his approach?
He suspended the liberal Tanzimat constitution in 1878 and re-centralized power in his own hands. And crucially, he revived the Sultan's role as caliph. The empire had lost most of its Christian territories in the Balkans. It was now overwhelmingly Muslim. Abdulhamid saw pan-Islamism emphasizing a shared Islamic identity and loyalty to him as caliph as the best way to unite the remaining diverse Muslim populations, Turks, Arabs, Kurds, Albanians, etc., against European encroachment. He used his spiritual authority as caliph to try and gain leverage with European powers, who ruled over millions of Muslims globally.
What kind of projects did he undertake?
Symbolic and practical things. The Hijaz Railway, connecting Istanbul to Medina, was a huge project, both logistically and spiritually unifying. He sent delegations to Muslim communities worldwide, from Africa to China. He famously refused Zionist leader Theodore Herzl's offer to buy Palestine.
Did he abandon modernization?
No, he continued many reforms, reorganizing the bureaucracy, improving finances, fighting corruption, modernizing the army with German help, significantly expanding education. Literacy rates improved.
But he couldn't stop secularism.
Ultimately, no. Liberal and nationalist ideas continued to spread among the educated elite. A secret society, the Young Turks, mostly European-educated, secular nationalist, eventually deposed him in 1909. The Sultan became a figurehead, and the Young Turks pushed Turkey towards a more aggressive Turkish nationalism.
So the 19th century overall was disastrous for Muslim political power globally.
Utterly. Britain, France, Russia, Holland, they carved up Muslim lands across Asia and Africa, driven by industrial power, colonial ambition, and that belief in the white man's burden.
And they deliberately fractured the Muslim world.
Consciously so. Aware of Islam's historical power to unify, they used divide and conquer. The Sykes-Picot Agreement during WWI is the infamous example, secretly carving up the Ottoman Arab provinces into arbitrary mandates like Iraq, Syria, Palestine, controlled by Britain and France. The Balfour Declaration, promising support for a Jewish national home in Palestine, sowed the seeds of future conflict. By WWI's end, vast majority of Muslims were under foreign occupation. A profound shock.
How did Muslims respond intellectually to this decline in occupation?
Two broad trends emerged, often in tension: modernism and traditionalism. Some Muslims, particularly urban elites, saw adopting Western culture and secular ideas as the way forward, the way to emulate the power of their conquerors. Arab Christians often played a key role in introducing Western liberalism and nationalism.
Arab nationalism became prominent.
Yes, especially as Ottoman pan-Islamism faded under the Young Turks. Thinkers emphasized shared Arab language and history, often downplaying religion. Initially led by Christians seeking equality, it was later adopted by Arab Muslims too. Secret societies aiming for Arab independence flourished, especially in Ottoman Syria, collaborating with the British against the Ottomans in WWI.
What about the traditional revivalists?
They offered a different diagnosis and solution. Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, back in 18th century Arabia, is a key figure. From the strict Hanbali tradition, influenced by Ibn Taymiyyah, he blamed Muslim decline squarely on un-Islamic innovations. Sufi practices he saw as excessive, Shiitism, modernist compromises.
His solution was Salafism.
Yes, advocating a return to what he saw as the pristine, unchanged form of Islam of the earliest generations, the Salaf. His alliance with the Saud family created the first Saudi state, which briefly controlled Mecca and Medina in the early 1800s, spreading Salafi ideas through the Hajj pilgrims. Though temporarily defeated, the Saudi-Wahhabi alliance re-emerged to create modern Saudi Arabia in the 20th century, giving this interpretation global influence.
Was there a similar revivalist movement in India?
Yes, Shah Waliullah, also in the 18th century. Faced with Mughal decline and Hindu resurgence, he feared the collapse of Muslim society in India. He emphasized unity, focusing on the social aspects of Sharia to hold the community together. Unlike Wahhab, he didn't preach armed struggle, recognizing Muslims were a minority in India and needed cohesion above all. Different contexts led to different emphases.
So bringing us to the modern Muslim world after WWI.
A period of nation-states emerging from colonial rule, often with arbitrary borders drawn by Europeans. Turkey, under Ataturk, chose a path of radical secular nationalism, suppressing public displays of Islam and non-Turkish identities.
And the Arab world.
Partitioned into mandates, then independent states like Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon. But those artificial borders often lumped together disparate ethnic and religious groups, like Sunni, Shia, Kurds in Iraq, leading to instability and conflict that, as the book notes, continue to shape the region profoundly today. So to recap briefly, we've covered a vast sweep of history with this deep dive into lost Islamic history. From Islam's beginnings in Arabia, through its incredible expansion and golden ages, its global reach from Spain to China, periods of devastating upheaval like the Crusades and Mongols, the rise of great empires like the Ottomans, and finally, the challenges of decline, colonialism, and the emergence of the modern world.
It really underscores that cyclical nature the book talks about: rise, decline, rebirth, and the sheer resilience of the civilization over 14 centuries. We've seen the continuous thread of intellectual achievement, building on the past, laying foundations for the future.
Absolutely. And we've seen how Islam served as a unifying force for incredibly diverse peoples, while also facing deep internal divisions and immense external pressures. Understanding the importance of unity, the impact of intellectual life, the consequences of fragmentation, these themes run throughout.
And hopefully this deep dive helps challenge those simplistic, often negative narratives about Islamic history you sometimes hear. It's so much richer, more complex, more global than often portrayed.
Exactly. Understanding this history isn't just about the past. It provides absolutely vital context for making sense of the world we live in today, the interactions between cultures, the challenges many societies face.
So a final thought to leave our listeners with, building on this epic journey. Considering the incredible resilience and adaptability shown throughout these 1,400 years, the way Islamic civilization absorbed blows, integrated diverse cultures, fostered intellectual rebirths, what historical forces, what foundational principles from this long history might Muslims draw upon today as they navigate the really complex challenges of the 21st century?